Hello and welcome to Ascension and the Philosopher's Stone. My name is Karina Wilkes and I want to start off with a very popular scripture from the Bible. And later on you'll see how it's important. In Luke chapter 11, Jesus says, and I'm going to paraphrase, "Seek and ye shall find, ask and it shall be given." And I've heard that scripture used by many churches to illustrate how we should ask for what we want, and we'll get it. But what they normally don't do is continue on to the rest of what he says directly thereafter. Those cryptic statements that he says, and if a son goes to a father and says, "I want bread," will he give him a stone? And if the son wants a fish, will he give him a serpent? And if he wants an egg, will he give him a scorpion? Well, hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will understand what is meant by the stone. That the stone is something that maybe we should ask for. But if you don't know to ask for it, you'll ask for that bread, and you'll say, "I want that bread." So where does the stone come from? Well, originally it came from the tenets of alchemy, the Philosopher's Stone. Now here at the bottom, over in both corners, I have the symbol that the alchemists would use to identify each other. At the time that alchemy became very prevalent in middle-aged Europe, the Catholic Church was in full sway, and anyone who was caught practicing alchemy would be immediately stoned or tortured or both. They were killed, they were executed. Sometimes they were excommunicated, which is they were told to leave and they could never return, they could never see their families again. But that was the rare case. I think they rather enjoyed killing whoever did not agree with them. But this symbol is very interesting in that, as in our first two lectures here, we've discussed these geometries at length, but I'm going to do a brief overview for those who have not seen it. The circle in the middle is a geometry that is, in the ancient world, feminine. It's considered feminine. It is a sphere, and all points on the surface of the sphere do exactly the same amount of work. It is a geometry that is inclusive. It covers the most volume for the same surface area. Now, the next level is the square. And the square is halfway between the female energy and the male energy. If we were to take a line and divide this square horizontally or along the diagonal, we would have two different pyramids, each facing an opposite direction, but in equal quantity or equal force. And anything that is in equal force but exactly opposite zeroes each other out, and so you get balance. Again, that is what the circle means. It means a structure that is in complete balance and every point on it does the same work. Now, the one pyramid by itself is totally masculine energy. It is at the bottom here, all the forces are gathered up and all the work is being done at the bottom, and less work is being done as you get to the top, but all the energy is stored here at the very tip, so it can rupture through to something new. The next layer is back to the circle. And how do we get back to the circle from male energy? Well, we simply create another equal but opposite pyramid here going in the opposite direction, and we get the Star of David symbol. And the Star of David symbol symbolizes balance. Balance of forces that are moving in one direction against those that are moving in the opposite direction, which is again the circle. So alchemy is about moving back and forth between male energy and female energy, and that is one of its main characteristics. The next part about alchemy is that it was made to, if you read anything on alchemy, you'll find that their main goal was to transmute metals into gold. And you might ask yourself, why gold? Why that metal in particular? Well, hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll know why gold was selected as the premier metal to transform into. The next thing that the Philosopher's Stone was supposed to do was to, if you found it, you would have the secrets of life. And when we talk about transmuting metals, they really wanted to transmute any type of matter. And alchemy became the forerunner of chemistry, where we studied the different interactions of matter with each other in order to produce certain substances. And so alchemy has chemi at the end, which is the forerunner of chemistry. Al comes from the Arabic word el, which means the or God. And chemi actually comes from the Egyptian mystery schools, because Egypt was called the land of Kim. So alchemy is the god of Egypt, really. That's really what it literally means if you take it all the way back to its ancient roots. And so the elixir of life is made from understanding how matter works. If we could just understand how matter works, we would understand how to keep ourselves alive forever. Now, there's another part of the legend of the Philosopher's Stone that has to do with a red powder, and that seems to have originated with John Dee, who was the Queen Elizabeth's personal astrologer and magician, court magician. And apparently he had made the claim that he was able to produce the Philosopher's Stone. And when he ground it down into a powder, it became this red powder that he could sprinkle on things and transmute things instantly from one thing to another. And he often amazed the court by doing it in front of people. And so this transmutational power that he, I guess, demonstrated for everyone, gave him a very high reputation for high magic. And that's how he became the court magician for the Queen. Today, a lot of people think that he was a big charlatan, doing nothing more than sleight of hand and misdirection, as most magicians do in today's world. So there's nothing really special about this red powder. And I wasn't able to find too much more on the red powder, except that Dee claimed it was from the Philosopher's Stone. One thing that amazes people is that Isaac Newton, the father of modern science, who gave us gravity and calculus and the 3 laws of physics, this same man spent most of his time doing alchemy, trying to find the secret mystery of this magical stone. So before we can move forward with what exactly the stone is, we need to understand that the alchemists were trying to affect change on all levels of existence. And so we need to talk about those 4 levels of existence. The first level is the physical level. That is where matter exists. How does this matter transmute from this to that? How does it move? The next level is called the astral level. Astral comes from a word meaning universe or the heavens. And that's where we see the stars. And so astral was picked as a way to discuss a more ethereal body that is contained within the physical, that is just adjacent to it, we can kind of experience it, but not really touch it. It's a little bit out of our reach. So it became known as the astral body. It is symbolized by water and emotional states. The next level is the mental level, the soft or mind. When we look at the word philosopher's stone, it has soft in it. So the word philosopher is a Greek word meaning beginning with the word phili, which means love, love of, and soph, which means mind. So this is a lover of the mind, someone who studies mental processes, rationality. It is associated with wind, and that may be backed up by some biblical things like the ruah. It says that God breathed the ruah into man, and he became a nephesh, a living being. And a lot of people don't know this, but ruah means more than breath. It means wisdom and knowledge. And so the breath of God actually gave wisdom to this man, Adam. So the mind is associated with the symbol of wind. The last level is the spiritual level, or the ethereal. Ethereal means bodiless. And we talked before about how in the spiritual level, there are no boundaries. Everything is continuous. It is one continuous energy. And therefore, there is no place where you say, oh, this ends here and this begins something else. It is bodiless. It is ethereal. And it is symbolized by fire. When we take all of these levels together, these were the 4 levels that alchemy was trying to affect. And if you look at some of the documents on the actual symbols used for the metals that they were trying to transmute, you will see a description of the metal and what it was used for, what its properties were. And then right underneath that, you would see some strange relationship or correlation to human emotions or human mental states. And so these were actually symbols that, even on a deeper level, they were trying to change human beings or transmute human beings into something using these alchemical formulas. The same formula that they would apply to chemistry, let's say like the crucible, where you heat something up so hot and put it under so much pressure that it turns into a stone. Well, you could apply that to a human being. You could put a human being in a crucible and cause them to go into all of these states and traumas so that they would select a more perfect path. And so these hidden types of methodologies were applied across all levels. The last thing I want people to understand is the Merkaba. The Merkaba is a word that, it's used in Judaism, but it's also used in the Egyptian mystery schools. Mer meaning light or vehicle. Ka meaning your consciousness, that part of you which is you, actually you, and Ba being the body. Now, according to the Kabbalists, the Jewish Kabbalists, and the mystery schools, each one of these 4 levels of existence have their own body. Even the spiritual has its own body, even though it is, the body is just boundless. You just become a part of everything. Now, in the Bible, there is also prophecies about the stone. And the question becomes, where did the alchemists get this idea of the Philosopher's Stone? And since there are prophecies regarding this stone, we have to ask ourselves, are these equivalent? Well, Daniel had a prophecy about the stone, and I'd like to read a small portion of it. That's found in Daniel chapter 2, verse 31 through 45. This image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while the stone was cut without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all others. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to another people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Well, in this prophecy, we see that there's a statue made of all these nice metals. And we see also that there is a stone not made of hands that is thrown at the feet, and it destroys the whole thing. But if we take a look at the properties of these metals, we can begin to understand a little more about what the stone means. Let's start up here at the head. The head is made of gold. And if we think about the properties of gold, gold is a very shiny, beautiful metal that when melted down and made smooth is highly reflective, and it stays that way forever. It stays beautiful. It does not corrode or corrupt or get any less shiny and beautiful than it was 1,000 years before. It stays in its original state. And another property of gold is that it's very, very soft. It is not a very good building material. You can't make a skyscraper with beams made of gold because they'll just flatten down under the weight. And so gold, even though it doesn't corrupt, it doesn't get all goopy with tarnish, it is totally useless for building with. And so we move to the next level. The next level is silver. And silver is almost as soft as gold is, but it tarnishes way too fast. It just gets corrupt really, really, really fast. And if anybody has had any silverware, whether it's teapots or spoons or whatever, you know that if you set them out in air for 2 weeks, they will begin to turn black. And so you get your little solution out and you rub them with the solution, and it turns it back into silver. So even though silver is soft and can tarnish, you can bring it back to its former luster. You have to put a little elbow grease into that, but it can be returned back to its shininess, and then the corruption process quickly begins all over again. So it also is a horrible building material. It can't take any type of pressure to hold anything up. You can't make any houses out of it. It is useless as a building material. Now let's move to bronze. Bronze is stronger than both gold and silver. And it has, like gold, it looks like gold in a way. It looks like it for a little while, and then it begins to tarnish. It tarnishes a lot slower than the silver, but it is a little stronger. And so even though it is better than both silver and gold, it is still not strong enough to be a building material. But like silver, it can be repolished and made to look beautiful again. And then it will go through corruption. And then it'll be made beautiful again. And then it'll go through corruption. And then it'll be made beautiful again. But you still can't build anything with it because it's not strong enough. Only when you get down to the iron. Look at those legs. Strong legs. Oh boy. We've got iron here. And suddenly, eureka! We have something that we can build with. We actually build skyscrapers with iron beams in the middle, used as supports. And so we have something that is very, very strong. But like silver and bronze, it begins to corrupt. And it forms an oxidization that, unfortunately, unlike the other two that oxidize, you can't buff iron back into shape. Once it oxidizes, that's it. It flakes off into this little powdery stuff, and that's it. So eventually, no matter how strong iron is, it will continue to get corrupted until it becomes too weak to use. It will collapse eventually. But it will collapse a long. The corruption is slow and steady. And it never goes in reverse. Down at the bottom here, we see another element. We see clay. And clay has begun to bond to the feet. In order to understand what that is, we have to understand the properties of clay and why the Bible is using clay in the first place. So the properties of clay is that it is what it is. It doesn't change into anything else. No matter how long goes by, clay is always clay. When you bake it into a pot, that pot will stay clay. It won't turn into anything else unless you physically try to mix it with something else. But on its own, it's not going to turn into anything else. The only problem with clay is that it's very brittle. It's not soft, it's brittle. And it, too, is not a very good building material. So it doesn't corrupt, but you can't do anything with it. And so if you could imagine this iron with the little veins packed with clay, not a very good combination. Now, where does the clay come from? Why use 4 different metals and then this clay stuff? Well, clay is symbolic of Sinai, where the law was received by Israel. And that is why they are called the potter's clay. They are molded. They are supposed to become something which does not change. But of course, they also are no good to build with. Now, Sinai means the place of miry clay and thorn. And you might ask yourself, well, why thorn? And we'll get into the nature of law in just a moment. Why would law be considered thorny? But anyway, to continue on, you have this stone here. And that's the very last element of this statue. And the stone, if you think about a stone, well, stones don't change. They are incorruptible. They're like that gold. And they can be beautiful. Think of diamonds. Diamonds are the hardest thing that we've been known to man. And it's a stone. It's hard. It's beautiful. Think of rubies and sapphires and emeralds. Extremely hard. Granite. All these different stones that they don't corrupt at all. And they're perfect building materials. We know this because the pyramids are still standing. Machu Picchu. Anything built of stone is still there. If it's built solidly of stone, it is there. The parts of it that weren't made of stone, gone. But if it's made out of stone, it is still standing. So we now come to the perfect building material. And this building material has to get rid of all this stuff that is so corrupted or so weak that it is no good to build with and take its place. There's another property of this metal statue that we needed to talk about, and that each one stands for a specific era in time. So when we talk about the gold head, it is the Babylonian Empire. And how do we know that? Because Daniel said so. He said, this is the head is you, O King Nebuchadnezzar. You are Babylon. The next civilization to take over was Media-Persia. Now the story of that goes, Nebuchadnezzar went into Jerusalem and took all of Israel captive. Killed a lot of folk, and took them all into captivity into Babylon for 70 years. And at the end of that 70 years, a man named Cyrus, whom Isaiah spoke about 500 years in advance of this incident, a man named Cyrus was able to get into the impenetrable city of Babylon. I call it impenetrable because it had a high wall surrounding its entire circumference. And the Babylonians had weapons that were considered superior to any other civilization at that time. They were excellent bowmen. And so the bowmen would get up on top of that high wall and shoot their arrows at any approaching army and kill them at a distance. And so no one had successfully infiltrated beyond the gates of the city. This city had never been conquered. And Cyrus was able to conquer it. And he did it by diverting the river Euphrates, which ran right through the center of it. And there were gates that would normally be down in the river, but the river was deep and wide, and no one really expected anyone to come traipsing through the river, because if you took boats, why, folks would see you. They would see you coming a mile away and start shooting. So what Cyrus did is he diverted the Euphrates River, and he then walked on foot through the ankle-deep waters of the Euphrates, he and his army. And it just so happened the night that he came, everybody was throwing a party. It was a celebration night. I forget what the celebration was, but they were drunk. And no one was really watching. The watchers were not really watching. They were all drunk or, doing what drunk folks do, partying. And they were able to walk right in through the gates, which should have been closed at that time of night, and sack the city. And they killed a great many Babylonian men, women, and children, and especially the aristocracy there. And the Jews that were among them were like, wait, your name is Cyrus, right? We have a prophecy. Our prophet Isaiah has spoken about you. And they read him the prophecy from the scrolls, and he was like, my God, because Isaiah said, I have named you Cyrus. I'm naming you now, 500 years in advance of your birth. This is what you're going to do. You're going to divert the river. You're going to come in, and you're going to free my people. And so when he read that, he's like, yes, I will free any God that can give me my name 500 years before I was born. Yes, I'm going to let you go. So that's what he did. He let Israel go, and they went back and they rebuilt the temple. And not only that, Cyrus helped pay for it. He helped lend some legitimacy to all of that. He helped them to rebuild. He was so impressed with that there was a prophecy that old that had mentioned him by name, that's what he did. So that's the story of Media-Persia. It was actually a dual civilization of Media and Persia, and you can see that it happened during the time that they had two arms, and so it's a two-pronged kind of thing. The next civilization to come through is Greece, and Daniel also mentions Greece by name. He talks about the one that he calls it a he-goat that spreads to the north, east, and west, and just conquers everything in its path, and that it has a one horn on top of its head and then that horn is replaced by it, and then it splits into four different directions. And what happened was when Alexander the Great came along and he conquered all of these places and created this huge empire, when he died mysteriously in Persia, by the way, in Babylon is where he actually died, his kingdom was split in four directions. His four generals took a piece each. Ptolemy, I know took Egypt, and I can't remember the rest of them. There's 4 more. And I know that 3 of them later on ganged up against the 4th and took and split and then resplit his stuff into three ways. But that's neither here nor there. He called them by name. He said that Greece was coming along, and so it was. And right after Greece was the iron of the Roman Empire and the Holy Roman Empire. So you see the 2 legs there. The Roman Empire and the Holy Roman Empire. Both of those were quite strong, and they spread their influence all the way down. And then in the final, where the clay begins to appear, that would be today. So we're talking about, the United States with its democracy and blah, blah, blah. But there's still this concept of iron. It's strong, but it's trying to do the right thing. It's trying to sort of be moral, right? But it's not working out, is it? Because the iron is still corrupted. We see corruption around us all the time, and the clay is not strong enough to get rid of that corruption. Only the stone will get rid of that corruption. So we have to ask ourselves, what is that stone? Is that stone the same as the stone of, I'm going to go past this because we kind of talked about this, but is that stone the same as the one the alchemists were looking for? Is the biblical stone the alchemist stone, the philosopher's stone? Well, in alchemy, they were looking to turn all metals or corruptible metals into incorruptible gold. So there's a match there. They were trying to transmute things into something incorruptible. The second parallel is that they were trying to create something immortal through the elixir of life. And that is the same thing going on here. This stone is supposed to last forever. It will never, ever, ever go away. It will just stay and grow and take over everything. They thought about things being transformed, but through magic, through this little red powder. You just kind of sprinkle it on like, some type of seasoning, and it would you get this table here and it'll turn into a potted plant or something. I don't know. But they were looking to transform something from one thing to the next. Lastly, if you really read their documents of the documents of some famous alchemists, you would find that they were all about transforming the soul, that these chemical formulas that they were structuring were also applicable to transforming human beings. And that's what that was one of the stated goals, transforming humanity into something incorruptible. So let's look at another scripture here. This is what Paul said. He said, "Behold, I tell you a mystery," in 1 Corinthians chapter 15:52. "Behold, I tell you a mystery, we shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible has put on incorruption, and this mortal has put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory." But now we need to talk about what is corruption. What does it mean when something is corrupt? Well, it means that it lacks integrity, that it reaches a zenith of what it can become, and then from that moment on, it begins to lose its luster. It begins to transform into something that is less than what it can be or what it has been. It begins to decay. And so on the physical level, that's what we're talking about, physical decay. We look at that in terms of things rotting away. We look at that in terms of aging, right? We age, and so we're decaying. We reach a zenith of potential, and then we begin to go downhill. And nothing can stop that. On the emotional level, we express that as selfishness. By trying to only look out for numero uno, we cause moments of opportunity for corruption to creep in, where someone will try to take advantage of someone else because, I don't really care what happens to you. I'm just trying to get it for me, right? And when that happens, systems become corrupt. When we talk about governmental systems, when we talk about banking systems, when we talk about corporate systems, any type of system can be corrupted by the emotional need for selfishness, for protectionism, to protect the self from anything that comes on. It breeds mistrust. It breeds all types of disastrous things, and things begin to collapse from the inside. Now, one of the Roman senators, Cicero, had this to say about corruption. He said that civilizations aren't collapsed by invading armies. They're collapsed from within by the guy that you're walking down the hall with, who is plotting treason, who's plotting treason, and who is looking out for his own self-interest. He's the guy that collapses it from within. And then the people from outside just come in and sweep up the crumbs. But it is really destroyed from within by our own lack of integrity towards each other to keep the bonds whole. On a mental level, we can talk about mental processes as being rational. As a software developer, I know that when I go on a project and someone says, "Oh, build me this website," I don't know how to build it, but I can find out. And I would ask my mind, well, what is the best way to build this? And my mind returns to me a process on how to get it accomplished. It may give me several alternatives. Now, let's say that the project that I'm working on is I'm building a road. And this road will, if I build it with option A, it'll go straight through this town and it'll go right through the business district, because that's the straightest line. That is the most economical for me. That's the most economical way to do it. I spend less money if I just go plowing straight through this town and rip up all their businesses, all their livelihood, and put my road there. That would be, in the calculations of what is most beneficial to myself, that would be the most efficient way. My mind will also say, well, if you don't want to do that, you can always deviate and go around, but you'd have to go several miles out and come back around, and it's going to cost you maybe double to do that. And so when I talk about non-ethical options, these two are tied together. Mind and emotions are tied together. If I don't really care about those people, I'm going to say to hell with them. I'm going to save my money, right? I'm going to make the non-ethical choice. And that rationalism of what do I care, what does that have to do with me, comes from a non-ethical, corrupt mind. The last level of corruption is on the spiritual level. It's when we experience separation and we don't find ourselves, we don't see ourselves as being connected to anything, not to the animals, not to the earth, and especially not to each other. A spiritual connection allows for your spirit to soar. When you see a bird go by, a part of you goes with it and soars with it. And you feel this awe overcome you, this great awe and love. And you don't feel separated at all from nature or from other human beings. You can see and feel your connectedness and how your survival is reliant on their survival. It allows you to feel and empathize with other people. So we need to be connected on all these levels. None of these can be left out. If you have spiritual separation, you're more than likely going to have an emotional, selfish view because you cannot connect or empathize with other people or even the environment or anything else that is out there beyond you, the boundary of you. So let's look at a few more prophecies about the stone and see if we can see some more correlations here. There is a very popular prophecy called the builders who reject the stone. The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. That's found in Psalms 118:22. Now, it appears again in the New Testament, and Jesus himself said that to the Pharisees, who were trying to, discredit him. So he already accepted that as being par for course because it was prophesied to be that way. Well, what is the stone in this context? It represents the temple. When that was said, it was in reference to the building of the temple. And so when a master builder takes a look at a stone and decides, oh, it's cracked, it's got some flaw, and it can't be used, and he puts it aside, it is by these assessments that we pick the best of the best stones to go into the temple. But a false assessment is just, or something that is just superficial, like I don't like its color, or maybe it's too big for this, but you don't use it at all. It might be perfect for another spot, but you don't use it at all because it's too big for this particular spot that you happen to be looking at right at this moment. Well, each stone is perfect for the temple. So what about the temple correlates to this stone? Well, the temple is the place where Israel would come on special days to hear a reading of the law. And here we're back to the meaning of clay, of Sinai, the place of miry clay and thorn. The law, how is it that it can be clay and thorny? Well, let's take a look at what laws are. Okay? Laws arise when there's conflict. You have two or more parties. Party number one wants to do things one way. Party number two wants to do that same thing a different way. And they both come in conflict. It's like, man, if you do that, you're going to be ripping up half my property. I don't like that. We do this all the time. Right? We deal with this all the time. Even in the example of the guy that wants to build his road through the middle of his town, even though it's going to destroy the livelihood of all these people, he would go ahead and do it without compensating anybody or without anything. He would just get his rich buddies to sign off on it. If there wasn't laws that said, no, you can't just go through and do that. You can't just take their property from them. You have to offer them something, some type of compensation. And so that law is there so that conflicts like that, I want to do this, but you're in my way, and so I'm going to do it anyway, and who cares what happens to you, so that there is some type of mediator between these conflicts. What we don't do with law is we don't look and see why that conflict started in the first place. Let's take another example. In my house, I have a sink, and right now the sink is broken. So every time people come over, I tell them, don't use the sink in the bathroom, or don't use that bathroom at all. Use the one downstairs. And I put a big sign up, and that's my law. I'm like, use broken. Please use the other bathroom. Big sign. That's the rule of the house right now. Well, it doesn't matter how many rules, if I lock the door. It doesn't matter how much of these things I do. or how many rules I put on people to not use that bathroom, the truth of the matter is those rules will never fix that sink. That sink will remain broken as long as I rely only on law to mitigate conflict. See, what has to happen, law is represented here in Yesod on the tree of life. And we are here in the physical universe. So when we create a law to mitigate our emotional, this is the emotional level, our emotional conflict, this becomes a seed that should go back into the creative process to find a solution on how to fix it. But we don't do that. We don't look at our laws and look at them as being indicators of some deeper context that we need to meditate on and fix it. Now, this level of the Kabbalah represents the Tanyan, the great dragon. He is the assessor of Israel. In Had and Netzach, that's where we take and we look at what's created and we say, do I really like this? I mean, you just created this jacket here, and it's supposed to keep me warm in the wintertime, but I don't like the way it's styled. It makes me look fat. It makes me look fat. I don't like it. That's Netzach, the emotional reaction. Had is the more, how do you say, it's more objective. Oh, look at the materials that you're using. Those materials are only found in Malaysia. You mean we have to ship just tons of this stuff from Malaysia? You know how expensive that's going to be? That's not efficient. Can we make this out of something else? And so based on these objections, we have a change or a law that arises in Yesod. And the law says you cannot use a material that is made 10,000 miles away. You have to use a material that is made closer to hand, somewhere closer by, so that it's energy efficient, so that it's efficient in its production. And that makes sense. But maybe this is a very unique material. So we go back up in the Nekether and we try to find a way of reproducing that material here closer to where it's going to be produced. And that's the way it should be. Another way to look at Kabbalah, it is symbolic of a man, and this is the head and the body, and this is the genitalia. And this area right here, which we call the assessment level, that Satan or the great dragon occupies, is where you have the intestines and the liver and everything that the bladder and everything that cleanses the body. You see, it's supposed to remove that which is impure, corrupt, and eliminate it. Then in the law, this part over here, Yesod, it represents the genitalia. And the genitalia is for reproduction. So the seeds of the next level of creation are created here in Yesod. And they go back and create a new cycle of creation in which something new is brought back into being. The last part about the temple is the cleansing, and we just went over that. The law is a part of that whole cleansing process of assessing and then eliminating what needs to be eliminated. So when Paul says that we are the stones of the temple, coming to him as a living stone, rejected indeed by men, but chosen by God and precious, you also, as living stones, are being built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. And so the idea is that we should be looking at law all the time, meditating on it. Another correlation that I'd like to bring up is the tefillin. In Judaism, the tefillin is a headband that is worn around the head, and it is also worn around the right arm. And inside the tefillin, there's a little pouch that you put the shrouded, which is actually yesid, it's kind of a scrambled anagram of yesid. You put the shrouded, or the written law that you want to meditate on. One law, you take it, you write it on a piece of paper, you stick it into the teflon, and you think about it. Now, the symbolism of the teflon is that you're supposed to think about this law. And if you're only supposed to obey the law, there's no reason to think about it. You just do it. You just obey it. But the reason why you're supposed to think about it is because the law is not the end-all be-all in this process. You're supposed to think about it because you should be trying to ask yourself, why is this law here? This doesn't just apply to the 613 mitzvahs. This applies to every law in existence. So it applies equally to don't steal, as it does to women are not allowed to have abortions. Both of these have root causes as to why we put such a rule in place in the first place. If we were to take the abortion issue, someone would say, well, the reason why the law is there is because babies can't speak for themselves and women just want to have control over their bodies. On one level, that's kind of true. But what no one ever asks is, why would a woman want to have an abortion in the first place? Why would you want to kill a piece of yourself? Something so precious as a little baby child. We never ask this question. Or we do, but we don't want to discuss it publicly because it would bring into question the very nature of the existence that we're living, the very nature of the type of kingdom we're living under. You see, a woman who is afraid that she's not making enough or getting enough sustenance to take care of herself, let alone another human being, might be afraid to bring another life into the world if that life is going to suffer or starve or whatever because she can't provide for it. They say, well, why don't you just let someone adopt? Well, that's wonderful, but for 9 months I have to carry this thing, and I'm going to be sick. There are going to be days I'm going to miss work. I'm going to jeopardize my job when I have to go and take off 6 weeks to go give birth. And even if I do this, there's no guarantee my place of employment is going to hold on to that job for me. I'm putting a lot on the line just to have this child. And so no one ever talks about those issues, that maybe the way that we've structured the way that we live is stupid. And that the law to mitigate, conflict is, although it might be legitimate, it is not addressing the root cause of things. So the wearing of the teflon, having the mark on the head and the hand in the Old Testament, was tantamount to really meditating on where those laws were coming from and then using your hand to build what needed to be built. That's why you have a second teflon to really think about how we can defeat this law. Now, when Jesus talked about it, he said, I have come to fulfill the law. That's exactly what he meant. He meant putting something in place that would mitigate the need for the law to exist in the first place. Now let's go back to my sink example, where if I fix the sink, the law is no longer needed. The law to go downstairs and use the downstairs bathroom, I don't need that anymore. You use the sink all you want to. And it's still a good law. The law will forever be good. It's still a good rule. It's just not needed. The circumstance that will cause it to come into being needed hopefully won't happen. I have destroyed the reason for this to ever fire. It's still there. So if it ever does happen, I can pull it back out of the closet and say, don't use this bathroom. It was a nice temporary solution before, and it'll be a nice temporary solution again. So we need to know that laws are meant to be temporary, not permanent fixtures that we continuously make more and more and more and more until we become so overburdened with trying to obey all these rules, even when they're stupid. It's like, oh, eventually we need to start thinking about why these rules are here in the first place and work on putting actual fixes to the way that we live in place rather than just law. Another scripture is when John the Baptist was talking about the coming of the Christ, he made this statement to the Pharisees. He says, "And do not think to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our father. For I say to you that God is able to raise up children to Abraham from these stones." And the implication here is, listen, it isn't about your heritage, your bloodline. It is about whether or not you are like this stone, this incorruptible stone that is a good building material for what? For building the kingdom where none suffers. So one who is a son is one who has become a stone, a building block in the temple of God. There's another prophecy about no one being able to lift the stone until the proper time. So, and anyone who tries to lift that stone will wind up tearing themselves in pieces. So there is a time when this will become relatively easy, but up until then, it's not. And if I go back here and we look, I'm going to go backwards a little bit. Sorry here. We look at this diagram, we can see that maybe this clay down here they want to lift the stone, give it to us now, but they're not strong enough because iron is strong. Iron is very strong, and it's way stronger than clay. And no matter how pure clay is, it just does not have the power or the strength that this iron does. So when it's trying to do this thing in the middle of the corrupted and strong power of iron, it's going to fail. We're going to go back now. The church is given the stone. So in Revelation, there is one of the churches that is given the stone, and it says this about that church. It says, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes," and this is who overcomes Satan, "I will give some of the hidden manna to eat. I will give him a white stone, and on the stone a new name written, which no one knows except him who receives it." The prophecy of the stone being given in Revelation has to do with another timeline. And I'm not going to go into that timeline here. But at a certain specific time, people will begin to know about the stone, and they will receive it in their minds and in their hearts. And it will change who they are. It will change the nature of their name. Now, you have to know what it means to give someone a name in the Bible. The names given is a clue as to their nature. So when you're reading someone's name in the Bible, if you look up the Hebrew meaning for that name, you will find out something about their nature, something about their personality. And the key thing about this stone is that it changes the personality of the person who accepts that this is the way things should be done, who receives it. See, I can try to give you something, and if you don't take it, you didn't receive it. So they have to receive the stone. They have to accept it. And it will change who they are. The last thing I want to say is that there is a time period, the time of the end, where Jesus, the disciples were looking they were on the Temple Mount, and they were talking about how beautiful it all was, all the buildings. And Jesus says, there's going to come a time when not a stone will be left upon a stone. And he wasn't just talking about the physical temple, which actually was destroyed and not a stone was left upon a stone. But he was talking about the disciples. And he was talking about those who are really doing what needs to be done to make the stone or to become stone. That they would be few and far between. There's going to come a time when not a stone would be left upon a stone. And yet, at a certain period of time, that stone will reappear. And when we are ready, it will crush everything else that is corrupt and replace it. It means that eventually, the good news is eventually we get it and we do it. Now, there's one last scripture, and unfortunately, I did not write it down. Anyway, in Zechariah chapter 3, verse 9, they talk about how the stone is given. It is a stone with 7 facets to it, and it has 7 eyes. And in Judaism, the 7 eyes are 7 modes of wisdom. Ein means knowledge. So the stone has 7 facets of knowledge. And the reason why I put all these different pictures here on this slide is because each of these is a depiction of those 7 levels of knowledge. Let's go through it. The cube here has 6 faces. If anybody who knows geometry, cubes have 6 faces to them. However, there is a hidden side that belongs inside the boundary of this cube, and that is the inside of the cube. It has 6 faces and an inside. And if you really want to get technical, there are really 8 sides. There's the 6 faces, the inside, and then everything else, which is outside. And when we compare this to music, for every tone, there are exactly 6 other tones that are in perfect harmony with the first. And when you get to the next step in the harmonic, you actually have the first, but at a different octave. So you create an octave by 7 distinct tones, and then a repetition of the first, which then starts the cycle all over again. So the outside, the 8th part, is the beginning of the new. The menorah is the lampstand in the temple. And the menorah stands for 6 crooked paths and 1 straight one, basically. In the description of the first menorah, which was given to Moses when the tent of meeting was being constructed, each of these 6 curved pathways here, at the end here there was a bowl, and each had 3 petals each. So these 3 had 3 petals, and these 3 over here had 3 petals. So 6 of the paths have 3 petals. But the one in the center, the straight path, had 4 petals. And it was completion. That means something is missing from these. This is why these are crooked. Something is missing. But when we understand that last little piece, it will straighten everything out. There are 6 days of work and 1 of Shabbat, or rest. 6 days of work, 6 days may you work. On the 7th you must rest, for rest is holy. It is one of the commandments that we must rest. It is the only day that is holy to Yahweh. And what that means is we should be working to create rest for everyone, all the time. Everyone should be resting. You say, well, who's going to plant the food and who's going to make the clothes? We're at a point now where we have machines that can do that automatically. Automated machines can do everything that we need them to do, and the rest of us, the rest of humanity can rest. we can have more and more wise working of our resources. We can use them more wisely. And we can do all of this and raise the living standards of everyone on this planet, including the wealthy. So we have this already. We have things already that could make this happen, but because of the paradigm that we live in, a lot of people either don't know that it's possible or they don't believe that it's possible. And both are just as bad. In Kabbalah, the lower 7 Sephers are what a human who still is alive can attain. That is the maximum that they can attain. Their attainment is this chalice, and with the center being of Teferet. So it corresponds to each one of these Sepher or gates. The Star of David is also the same thing. It has 6 points on it going in different directions. We also know that from earlier that it's actually 2 triangles, one headed in one direction and the other headed in the exact opposite direction, so as to create balance. And in the center is this 7th part. It's the 7th part that is in balance. Here is the seed of life, and we've talked about these in the past presentations. It too is 6 circles with a 7th in the middle. Now these circles are at 5 ratios to each other. So you've got all of these things coming together. We learned last time that the tree of life is actually the points, these little points here. Blah, 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 blah. That's the tree of life. This is where we get the tree of life. Right here, where these intersections are. This is Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah is hidden inside this shape. We also learn that this is the only shape that forms a tube torus, which can fold in on itself. It is the only shape that can do that. And that the universe might very well be like a Mobius continuum that, you know, even though it looks multidimensional, it can fold in on itself, and you're really only looking at some flattened out number of dimensions. It might be like 6 dimensions, but it looks like 3 because, you know, they're like a Mobius continuum and fold in on each other. And with the tube torus, you can do that. So there's a lot of knowledge and information hidden inside of these diagrams or these symbols that are used in the Bible text. Another thing I want to say is that each of these Sepher are called, or the word Sepher means knowledge. It means a book of knowledge actually. And it also means jewels or stones. So there are 7 stones here that we can attain. 7 jewels of knowledge. And when we get to the last jewel, when we understand all 7, we'll be ready to make the stone. I want to talk now about the gates of ascension, and this has to do with Kabbalah, but it also has to do with other thoughts. Here we see this is a Masonic symbol. You see the compass and the square in the center here. That is a Masonic symbol. And this is a gateway. And on the gateway you see this checkered floor. And this is shown a lot in, especially a lot of the Middle Ages symbols and the Middle Aged pictures that were drawn. I forget what they call those. But anyway, they have these checkered floors here. And we learned earlier in a previous lesson that the white energy is energy that is moving towards us. And so we see it as good. We're receiving. I got a paycheck. You know, I just won the lotto. I had a baby born. Oh, wonderful energy's coming into my system. It's energy that I want coming into my system. And that the black stands for energy that is moving away from it. My mom died. I lost my job. My car broke down. I got to pick my kid up from school, and I'm gonna have to leave work early. All of these things that irritate us because it's energy moving out or energy that we have to expend extra. And so that forms the checkered floor. In the background, you see another gateway. You see these two pillars, and these are the pillars of Jachin and Boaz. And if you look really close, you'll see the J and the B here, Jachin and Boaz. And these correspond to the two columns in the temple, which were also named Jachin and Boaz. So within the Masonic tradition, they understand that you cannot pass a gate that you're not ready for. Here's the second one that I wanted to look at. If you look closely, there's a goat man holding a woman back from going past the gate. And again, if you look close, you'll see a J and a B, Jachin and Boaz. And so he's holding her back. Now the goat man, and you can look at Jesus is saying about the separation of the sheep from the goats. The goats don't see how they're connected to everyone else. They don't act as a single, they all act as individuals, all about me. If they do band together, it's for their own benefit. And so the goat man is symbolic of our selfishness. We also, I guess, would associate such an image with Lucifer. And so Lucifer is trying to hold this, or with Satan, and Satan is trying to hold this woman from going back, from passing through these gates. But actually, the role of Satan is not really to keep us from passing through, per se. His job is to test to see if we're ready, if we have obtained enough knowledge, enough love, enough concern for each other to pass through the gate and receive the next step of information to move us along. In the last picture, we see a symbol, we see the gateway, we see the checkered floor, and we see in the background the whole Kabbalah. And it is said that for every sefer in the Kabbalah, if I were to go into Malkut, I would find an entire tree of life. I would be standing at the gate, and I would look through the gate, and I would see a second Kabbalah. In that one sefer, there would be a whole nother one in there. And I will go, wow, there's a whole another tree. I thought I was done. No, there's a whole tree inside that one sphere of information. So the separat on the tree of life are gateways. They're gateways of ascension. They test us to whether or not we have obtained enough love for each other, where we're not going to be selfish, where we're not going to make unethical or corrupt decisions because we're afraid of what's going to happen to me if I give some of myself or not take advantage of blah, 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 all the excuses that we give. This is what they do. They test to make sure that we're ready because they want a quality product to come out together. And by the time you get to the seventh sefer, yes, you should be a stone. You should have all the parts that you need to build what needs to be built. Now, there is a difference between love and wisdom. Love is where it's not about how I feel about me. A lot of times we use love in the totally wrong way. I love him. He makes me feel so good. Oh, he treats me so nice. Well, now I have to ask you, how do you treat him? Do you cook him dinner? Do you wash his clothes? Do you do anything for him? Nah. He's got to do all that for me. I love the way he makes me feel. Well, see, that's not love. That's selfishness. That has nothing to do with love. Love is about the energy that you're willing to give to another being to make sure that they're okay, to make sure that they are functioning properly, that their life is okay. And if you're always talking about the energy that is coming into you, that's not love. That's you gloating about your good thing. Now, love is different than wisdom. And I have a story on this that I'd like to share. It's an article that I read, and it stuck with me because this lady was talking about how she loved her husband, but he liked to have a little bit to drink after work. And sometimes he would come in stumbling, roaring drunk. And he would pass out, and she would lovingly drag him into the bedroom, take his shoes off, put him to bed. Well, that started to happen more frequently, and eventually he was coming in and vomiting, and and she would sit there and clean it up, and she did it for years. And finally, one day, something in her snapped, and she found she didn't really like this man anymore. This man she was just tired of having to drag his nasty carcass and clean him up, and she was doing this almost every evening now, cleaning him up, cleaning up the vomit, and it was just too much. So she decided that I'm going to leave him there. I'm just going to leave him, and so he woke up the next day all covered in vomit and reeking of booze, and he had, up until this point, thought that it was him, that he had somehow stumbled into bed, taken off his shoes, and woke up, nice and cleaned up. He had thought that he had been doing all of that. He had no idea his wife had been struggling to put him in bed all this time and to keep him clean and all of this. Her love for him did that. And she had finally just got tired of doing it. And and every time after that, she said that she just left him there, like whatever. She tried to tell him, listen, honey, no, I'm not doing it anymore. So he finally asked her, he's like, was that you? And she's like, yes. And you know what? I'm tired now. I'm leaving. And she did. She left. She went and started a new life and found happiness otherwise. Happiness that she hadn't found in years, according to the article. However, the husband, now being left with the consequences of his actions, decided to clean himself up. He had not known that he was causing her so much trouble. And even though what she did was loving all those years, it was not very wise. If she had, the very first time he walked in stumbling drunk and she put him to bed, she should have told him the very next day, listen, honey, you came in drunk last night and you passed out in the foyer. And, I understand that things like that can happen, but please don't let it happen again, because you're pretty heavy and I don't want to be dragging you. I love you. And I don't mind helping you, but you have to pull your own weight. If she had had that conversation with him and let him know up front that he needed to be responsible for himself, that he needed to be a man, and demanded that he be that, probably would not have had as much, it would not have gone as long, and she would not have lost her love for him. Because she really did love him to have tried to clean him up and put him to bed all those years. A lot of people don't have that level of love. And I hope that it didn't destroy that in her, that wanting to help another, because that really is the definition of love. But he's wrong for what he did, burdening her with his inconsiderateness, with his selfishness, because really that's what it is. Getting drunk and not pulling your own weight is selfish. And this is how we test each other. This is how we become Satan, how we test each other, through our selfishness. When we're selfish, we put burdens on everybody else, and we test their love. What's the extent that you're going to keep putting up with my crap? And a lot of people at this stage don't have a whole lot of love. Their love is cold. It is a cold thing. It's like, no, I'm not putting up with that at all. So there are lessons to be learned here. The other thing, and I've said this before, you can't ascend on the Kabbalah any further than what you can understand. So there are a lot of people who are talking about how spiritually developed they are and blah, blah, blah. I'm doing Reiki and this, and that's all wonderful. I think that's a wonderful thing. But there are levels and there are levels. And some people can, when they talk about their levels, I know exactly where they are on that tree just by what they say and what they value. Because you can't pass a level on the tree that you don't understand or that you don't feel or that that's not in your heart to do. You just can't ascend beyond that. And we need to have understanding on all levels of being. Like I spoke before, if you're still in separation on the spiritual level, it's pretty hard for you to connect on an emotional and mental level to not make corrupt decisions. So the first video is here. See if I can get it to come up. There it is.
Is that the Southern Oracle?
Oh, no. It's the first of the 2 gates you must pass through before you reach the Southern Oracle and get me the final information for my book. Of course, most people never get that far.
Why?
The Sphinx's eyes stay closed until someone who does not feel his own worth tries to pass by. Ah! Here comes one that looks fancy. Let's see what he really thinks of himself. Look, look. Go on, scaredy cat. Oh, go on. Oh, it's my turn. Let me see. I'm the scientist.
He's going on. I think he's gonna make it.
The Sphinx's eyes, are they open or shut? Let me see.
They're shut.
Over here.
No, wait! Oh. The eyes are open.
Did he make it? Did he?
No.
Fancy armor doesn't help. The Sphinxes can see straight into your heart. Listen, boy. Next time, let me see what happens. It's my telescope.
I'm gonna try it.
No! Don't go yet. I've not told you about the next game. It's even worse than this one. A trail! A trail! Oh, it is. Oh. Oh. You'll never make it. You'll never make it. Don't start to doubt yourself. Be confident.
Be confident. Be confident. Run, Atreyu! Run!
Run, Atreyu!
Run now!
Okay, several good points in this video is that again, you're seeing in a little kid's movie how this idea of not being able to pass a gate unless you're ready is portrayed. He was just able to squeak through. Almost didn't make it, but he was just able to squeak through. Another thing that they said that probably needs a little bit of explaining is that he said that the gates looked at your self-worth. Well, it's more than just your self-worth. It looks at that too. You're caring for yourself. Because if you can't love your own self, how then can you love someone else? The thing that you would do to yourself, if you would stick pins into your own arm, you would have no problem sticking pins in someone else's arm. If you can stand that pain, of course you can do that to someone else very easily. If you can work yourself to death, if you have a work ethic that you hardly ever rest, you have no problem with working other people to death, as if their circumstances, their health, their mental state is the exact same as yours. No one's mental state is the exact same as yours. And so, since that is the case, you cannot expect that everyone is going to be able to mirror what the constraints that you have put on yourself, or anything that you have put on yourself. Are there any questions? Thank you for watching.